So here's part 3, and really my favorite part of looking at relationships, and that is a combined chart. So this is actually called a Synastry chart. On the outside, we have Christy's information, her natal chart, and on the inside, we have Ian's. So the reason this is my favorite is because, well, first of all, we get to look at the way when you come into my life, what your whole, we look at the natal chart. This is a natal chart, so it's more than this, obviously. But when you come into my life, so for Christy and Ian, Christy will be bringing certain influences to certain parts of Ian's psyche. So just by virtue of her joining and coming into his realm of perception, there are certain things that are, and you can see for you guys, there's a lot of really juicy stuff that's being activated, and vice versa. When he comes around into her life, it's like a planetary transit. That's one way of saying it. So like when he comes around, Jupiter, the way that he is his inner guru, his inner light, his inner enlightened self, the part of him that is eternally light, is in opposition to Christie's Jupiter, Sun, and Venus in Leo. So just from that, there's so much we can say just by each one of these different planetary, I think of it as a transit in a way, because you coming around is a transit, like you're bringing that certain planetary energy to a certain part of my soul, of my psyche, which is shown by the chart. We can see that part. So, and let's just start with this one. So Jupiter, the way that he is striving for more light. This could be through education, through training, through traveling, through finding new ways to have abundance. So his studies for education, for his work, training for work. And that in opposition to her, this stellium we talked about in Christie's reading, where it is the Sun and Jupiter together, which both show a part of our inner light. Jupiter being more on the side of philosophy, education, training, travel, and the Sun being on the side of the way your heart shines its light through your whole life. And then Venus being right there, this makes this, like, we can take them apart and talk about them, and we can also put them all together and have this alchemy that happens. When there's 3 planets together, they do create an alchemy with each other. So now we have Christie's inner light, her inner guru, the part of her that wants to travel and learn and bring light to the world and light herself up for evolution and expansion. That's Jupiter. And her Sun, her solar flare, that's the heart pumping, the flavor that you bring to everything in your life. Also has Venus, which wants sensuality, seduction, attraction, beauty, pleasure. So all of those together brings, like, the things that you want to study about have a sensuality to them. The way that you shine your Leo radiant heart through all of your life also has that Venusian pleasure and beauty and seduction. It's all added in together, and the way that you want to go out to learn and study and bring light to the world, that's all together. This connection that you two have with his Jupiter, his inner guru, in opposition to, well, first of all, let's look at this. It's in opposition to his midheaven. Midheaven is the contribution to the world. This has to do with his career, how he's best suited to perform a service to us, to all of humanity. having having Jupiter in opposition to his midheaven says that part of his contribution to the world it has to do something with philosophy, his life philosophy, the way that he is his philosophy, the way that he is, what he thinks about, his inner light, and that coming up in some way to serve humanity. So now we see that also Christie's Jupiter, Sun, Venus is right here in the mix of all of this. So I can see this as in the meeting, in you two meeting, there being a sense of knowing that there was something that you two would do together. Jupiter in opposition, like just that those two things alone says that Jupiter meeting, like his Jupiter, his inner philosopher, his philosophy, you can say, meeting hers. So at the moment they meet, there's already this light that comes. Like the relationship itself has a light to it that other people will be attracted to. And also in some way, I feel like this could really benefit his work, his contribution to the world. The relationship in some ways becomes part of his contribution to the world, whether it is just her Venusian seduction and her radiant Leo heart and her inner Jupiter that has luck and abundance and jovial youthfulness, all of those things influencing his so I'm saying you don't have to necessarily work together, although I can see that possibly too, if you wanted to go that route. And there's definitely other things on the chart that talk to us about that. And I'm just going to make a note here so we can get into that if you want to go further on the contribution to the world thing, because he's in blue. His midheaven is square to his own Saturn South node, which is directly activated by Christie's Uranus. I'm going to talk, this is a lot to unpack. So let's go back up here for a minute and let me finish the sentence. It was like you could work together, technically, or just the relationship itself and focusing on that section of like how she radiates, how she goes out self-loving, self-appreciative, appreciating the fact that she has this beautiful face, beautiful body, beautiful inner light that shines forth. Being able to have that as a source of inspiration for your career. And also his Jupiter is bouncing off of that, which in itself, if the midheaven weren't here, in itself, having Jupiter to bounce off of this only magnifies. Jupiter expands. It's a beneficial, it's a planet that's known as a beneficent. So just that alone says that, bouncing back and forth, just bringing abundance and gifts and beneficial energy of expansion, evolution, youthfulness, jovial, fun, Jupiterian energy. Okay, so then when we bring back in the fact that his midheaven is there, this can be a benefit for his work. This can benefit all of this juiciness of Christie's Leo energy. This is basically if you want to look at good, bad, I don't like talking about things in good, bad, because, even this best thing can become exhausting and annoying. So it's not like a good, bad. It's more like this could evolve and expand consciousness for you and for whoever is a recipient of Ian's service or contribution to the world. So let's now dive on down to this 90-degree angle, breaking apart little by little first, what is the South Node in Saturn? So South Node is our past habits, patterns, addictions. It's something that we've already accomplished. Just like the moon, in a lot of ways, if we stay focused on those things, they can become toxic. And so it's not a bad thing. South Node, if you Google it, it's going to say like, stay away from it. It's your addiction. It's your karma. And yes, but you don't have to stay away from it as much as you need to be like, oh, it's like I've already eaten my greens today. You're not going to just keep eating greens. You've already done that. Now you need some protein. You need some other things. Same thing. If you keep doing those South Node things, it does become toxic to you. Just like if you just ate broccoli all day, it was good for a minute, and now it's becoming, your body is starting to respond negatively to it. So that's the South Node, and he's got Saturn on the South Node, which says that possibly there has been an addiction to work, to structure and form. Somehow this could also become an aversion to authority, because we can say in a past life, or in a past part of your experience in life, you've had situations where you either have been an authoritarian and been so regulated, so structured. Maybe your father was in military, or you were brought up in a military town or military school or police academy or something like that, where there's so much regimented things that you end up having like you hate it, and then you become adverse to authority figures, which can create a lot of problems in life. So that's one way of looking at the South Node next to Saturn, that conjunction there. That's one way. Another way is like you were so, this can be a workaholic, somebody who is so addicted and accustomed to, like, say we're at the park and we're playing, and suddenly it's like, oh, how can we make money out of this? Or, you meet somebody and you're like, oh, how can we make this into a, always wanted to create structure and form, always wanting to get something going. And with Saturn on the South Node, it can also kind of feel like a failure. It can feel like you always want to, and then it doesn't. And there's reasons for that. Partially, I feel like I'm going more into let's look at Ian's chart and do a reading. And I don't want to do that. So just giving a little example of what South Node on Saturn means. What does that represent? So now let's look at her Uranus activating this part. So Uranus is a change agent, and it wants to, the way I see, so it's like, it's rebellious, it's innovative. Nothing can be south. It doesn't get any more like oppositional, because Uranus wants what's fresh and new and exciting. The South is what has already been. It's like, we know when we go south in any town, we already know that's where we're going to find the soul food restaurants. That's the hood in most towns. The hood is also where we get the best twerking classes, and we get the best soul food, and we get the best voodoo people and the Reiki masters, and that's where the soul of the town is, down south. Nothing's ever going to change about that. The South has always been the soul. So now Uranus comes. Uranus is the future. Uranus is so far north that it wants to evolve and grow and put in a new stoplight and make, have those bikes that you can rent, and it wants to do innovative things. So when we see this here, it's like many things I can see here, like this wanting to bring radical change to his soul, habits, patterns, addictions, and yay for that. Because imagine if somebody from the north came down to the south and was like, hey, let's do this, and we could improve upon the soul of that city. We could improve upon the soul of that part of the town or of America or wherever it is. Even in Europe, the South is always the soul. So we could actually, I don't know. I can't say for sure if that's a fact. Anyway, this can be a very beneficial thing if we're aware of it. So now let's look at this in the other direction. Like the South, for him, his South Saturn touching her Uranus. So whenever that part of him comes to her, it could just, imagine that scenery, like bringing the South to the North. And I don't want to use the North anymore when we're going in this direction, because this is literally the part of Christy that wants change, that wants innovation, wants to be radical, and wants ultimate freedom. This is like freeing the mind, freeing the physical body, being financially free, all of that stuff. And then so his South node coming there could be the gifts that he has that are so deep in him. Like we talked about with the moon, it's like a DNA level gift that you have, something that's so patterned into you. Could be also helping to encourage, it's like, this, whatever it is for you, South node in Scorpio in the first house, how to be strong and fierce, how to connect with magical things. And that could be what is, improving upon her ability to be free and to be expansive. Okay, so let's connect all of these things now. And what we started with was that this is square, and squares are meant to be challenging. A 90-degree angle is meant to be challenging. And this little thing already feels challenging as it is, because they don't really go together. It's not like a harmonious thing. It's like bringing innovation to something that's deeply rooted in the soul, and also his deeply rooted soul things communicating with the part of her that is most wanting freedom and expansion. And this is in a 90-degree angle to this really, really beautiful, beneficial aspect that you two have. So I can see this being something, first seeing where you guys are at with this. And it could also be a hidden thing, because the South node is often hidden in the shadows. So I feel like I'm hearing like, let's move on from this, because this might not have even shown up in your relationship. South is often like also where it's like, cracks and corners and cockroaches and like the most grass rooty part of our chart is the South node. So I feel like it could get too complicated, but just knowing that you have this 90-degree challenging aspect with these things here, and we can definitely revisit that, but there's a lot more prominent things. I only started with this because it's the first thing I saw, but the thing I really wanted to start with was your Mars connection that you have here. So Mars and Venus are always going to be top priority on a relationship chart. Mars, Venus, the relationship axis, and the moon, which we already talked about. But let's look at how those play with each other on your chart. So Mars in the same sign, and they are within 10 degrees of each other, because his is at 1, hers is at 7. So they're pretty close. And there's a lot of things that can happen here. One, which I mentioned before, was that how nice that what she craves as her longing for connection with the other is what he is. That seems so beneficial. And the other side of that is that it could inhibit her from reaching her own potential as her inner masculine. It could, but it doesn't have to, because she could, Christy, you could just be like, oh yeah, this is me. I love you and these things you're doing because this is part of me, and I want to also develop that part of myself. Well, another thing that can happen, just because Mars is the planet of war, it's our desire, it's our, you know, our willpower. This is, we have our first Saturn return at 2, when we're 2, and people call it I call it the terrific 2s, because it's very a time when a child is individuating and becoming, they found their power of no, and they are so Mars like at 2 years old. Ooh, I got tingles everywhere just thinking of how powerful and potent of a time that is when a child reaches 2. I love it. Love it. Because it helps me also to get into that part of myself, like engaging with a 2-year-old. So having these two connected so close, I don't know if you're feeling me, if I need to say it. This could be potentially very great for sex, because you both get ignited, and it's you get that. Mars, the symbology of Mars is a combination of Eros, the god of lust and desire, and Eris, the god of war. So it brings all of this passion, fire, intensity, and having those two close to each other could be that where we're either, I'm sorry to say this, but fucking or fighting. It could have that, that super strong polarity of, like, it's not really a polarity. It's on the same end of the pole of fire and desire and passion. So just taking note of that and finding that place for you guys where passion can turn into rage and anger, and how to play with that, because anger and rage are really great emotions when we know how to use them for something constructive. And of course, sometimes you just got to feel it, but not attack each other and not be violent toward each other, because Mars conjunction this close could be that. So that was the first thing I wanted to point out. And also, this is Christie's midheaven. So some of that Martian energy, say there's excess amounts of it that feel like just get you lit up, and it's not, you didn't get utilized in the bedroom or utilized in the parts of your life where you're planning a trip, or you need to, direct energy toward a project in your guys' relationship. That energy can also be used for your career. And I find that to be a really helpful thing to think about. Like, okay, there's nothing else I can do. I've exhausted my working with this in our relationship. And now I'm going to take that energy and create something. Use it as there's a Nako lyrics, and he says, don't waste your hate. Gather it and create. And that's something that, I think about that a lot. It's like, you can't possibly use all of that energy in constructive ways. Sometimes you do really need to use that for your project, for what you're going to do out in the world as your service to humanity. Okay, so next thing that seems really important to me in a relationship chart, well, I wanted to look at the moon, so let's go to the moon. Her moon and her Mercury, which we discussed, are in a square angle to his Venus. This, so Venus for him, there's two things I need to talk about here. So Venus for him, that's his, what's attractive, what he's attracted to, the way he pulls things in toward him. And this being square, let's just talk about the moon for now, because it makes more sense. Her moon, these are both sensual planets. The moon has to do with the way that it's our deep, deep inner emotional reality, dreams, intuition, feelings, emotions, the way that we perceive ourselves from the inside. It's that one thread of, like, the tone, the sound vibration from your inside that has been the same ever since you were a child. I like to think about that. It's like the mood that has seemed pretty continuous, the thread of your moods that has been pretty much the same throughout your whole life. Very deep, very intimate part of yourself. You're sharing that in a 90-degree angle to his inner Venus, his inner feminine. So 90-degree angles are meant to be challenging. When we face this challenge, it becomes an unbreakable bond in the relationship. And it may always be a challenge, but it's something that becomes foundational to, like, yes, this part is difficult and we face it. And now we have created this new way. 90-degree angles are where we create alchemy in our lives. So now we have created this new way to love, to experience sensuality, to share my dreams and my intuition with him in ways that feed his senses. And then that's going in this direction. I share my intuition. Oh, where am I? I share my intuition and my dreams. I'm sharing my deep inner reality, this thread of mine that has been the same since childhood. I'm sharing that, even though it's vulnerable and challenging, with his inner Venus. Meaning that the part of him that wants to have beauty and attraction and wants to have his sense awareness being fed, his sensuality. And then when we turn this in this direction, it's like that part of him that wants those things and that is beautiful and that is abundance and that earth goddess that lives within him, sharing vulnerability, sharing his, how does it feel in your body? He's sharing. I'm asking you that. How does it feel in your body? So when, being able to share your sensual awareness I'm seeing this as like in the bed, in the dark, talking about these things, working in ways of maybe like has to do with something sensual. So it needs to be, first thing in the morning, waking up and that, oh, I had this dream, and then somehow sharing it in sensual ways to his inner Venus. Okay, so if we don't do that, this could be a fight. This could be a battle between my sensual needs are important. Well, why don't you care about my dreams? Why don't you care about my inner reality? Well, what about my senses? So we need to find a way to integrate these two things and say yes to both. And because her Mercury is there, I do sense this as being something that needs to be talked about, expressed, even typed, written to each other. Hey honey, what would you like today? What would you like to eat today? What would you like, asking him about that. And then him definitely engaging. What did you dream about? And what is your dream? What is the dream of your life? Like, what is the thing you most want? Like, having these kind of conversations seem like it would be something that would help to find that way to work with a challenging situation, something that could be challenging. So bringing that together, I really love that Venus and Moon square. Okay, the other thing I really wanted to talk about, please pause the video and take moments because I know I'm talking really fast. So his north node is where he's going. That's his north. If we talked about south as being the past, north is where you're going. North is considered to be our life purpose. Sorry. When we look at the north node, this is destiny, life purpose, what we're here for. So looking at that, her Chiron and Vesta, I know I didn't talk about this in the first part at all. I'll talk about it now. So when she comes around, these things, which I'm going to mention, will activate his life purpose, his destiny. This is like, this part of her helps him move into his life purpose. It is progressive. There's some relationships are karmic, and there's a lot of things on the south, a lot of things that need to be done, or, it's a habit or a pattern. When something's on the north node, it says like this relationship needed to happen and it is for progress. It's for where you're going in your life. So this Chiron has to do with the short and easy version of Chiron. I mean, I wrote a whole little book. It's a big topic. Chiron is the wholeness of all of astrology. One thing I said this week was that there's no card for Chiron in the tarot, in the 72 card tarot deck, because Chiron represents the whole deck. There's no one part in our body represented by Chiron, because Chiron is the wholeness of the body, psyche, soul, all of it. In astrology, Aries is the head, Taurus is the throat. Like there's parts of the body that correspond to the planets and to the signs. Chiron, on the other hand, it is the whole thing. So this is where we have our fracture point. Chiron is known as the wounded healer, because that wound, that thing that feels like, oh my God, it's our deepest secret, because we don't want people to know about our, what our wound is. I talk about mine all the time, because I know that to heal that is to own it and then wear it outward. Instead of keeping a Band-Aid on it and covering it up, I know that I need to rip that Band-Aid off and let the light see it and share that. That's my wisdom. The worst pain that I have is also the biggest gift that I have. Same thing goes for everybody. We all have that. Most people want to hide it because it hurts and it's embarrassing. It's shame, guilt, abandonment, loss, betrayal. Chiron represents those things, but through those things, we find our medicine. We find our biggest gift, and the thing that, the reason we love seeing people be vulnerable is because in some way we have that thing that they're being vulnerable about, and it makes us cry, because we're like, oh my God, how are you talking about that right now? Like, this is something that I would never tell people. Okay, so that's kind of summing up Chiron in a way. And Christy's Chiron is right next to Vesta. Vesta is the part of us that is our sacred work. So when I see Vesta next to Chiron, I feel like part of your sacred work is to do that healing on your own mortal wound, and then sharing that medicine. And it's like a day-to-day, everyday process, because Vesta has to do with sacred work as opposed to like, your work in the world. Sacred work means those tiny little steps of every single day that you have to do. I get up, do oil pulling, brush my teeth, brush my skin, drink water. It's those things. And so it gives me the feeling that part of, again, like, not to get into like Christy's sacred wounds and her work, but just to say that part of her is helping his evolution and expansion, and vice versa. Him coming around brings a sense of evolution and expansion to this challenging part of Christy. This is an amazing connection. To me, it feels like what a blessing to have this in your life. And also, even though it is to me, such a positive, beneficial thing, it can be annoying, because this wound we don't always want to evolve. We can feel, just let me be wounded. Just leave me alone and let me be wounded. But the North Node doesn't let you be wounded. It's like we need to evolve, go forward. It has this sense of like, it's a big flashlight, like shining on that. So, working with that in whatever way. And then when we see this will also be helping him to evolve, because he's getting this experience that's very unique, helping him to evolve and move into his life purpose and his destiny. Okay. One more thing I want to mention here, Christy's Juno. Juno represents the good wife, the good partner. Has to do with it's known as a marriage indicator. It's what we need in relationship to feel a sense of commitment to a thing. Like, what would it take? She's got that in Gemini, so it says that it needs to be fun, it needs to be informative, it needs to be playful and creative. And this is conjunct, means it's exact to his Sun and Mercury. And I talked about that as one of the first things, because I was like, oh, cool. It's in Gemini, creative, fun, and also Mercury, who is the planet of thinking and information and expression. So it feels like perfect to me, because these things, his Sun in Gemini with Mercury, connect very, very synergistically, like they are the same. They go together. Her needs for what she needs in a relationship are completely being met by this fun, informative, creative, playful. This is the Sun. The way you do it, one thing is the way you do everything, is exactly the same as what her needs are in relationships. So thank you so much. Thank you for being patient while I had my flu experience. And please feel free to ask any questions about anything that I've covered. I am more than happy to answer. It actually really helps me a lot when I can hear feedback and whatever questions you two might have. So thanks again, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.